What's up guys, my name is Lauren and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to go over some budgeting tips because as simple as it seems, budgeting is actually kind of tricky. Now in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to do these tricks using my spreadsheet, but these things really can apply to many different budgeting systems. If you do want to purchase my budget dashboard for your own budgeting, it will be linked in the video description. All right, tip number one, when you are using a zero-based budget, which means that you are allocating every dollar of your income before the month starts to a budget category. When you're using a zero-based budget, you need to make sure the left to budget is zero when the month starts. So in my budget spreadsheet, it's right in the top left corner, right below where it says the month, it says left to budget. And you want to make sure that amount is zero before the month starts. If you haven't allocated every single dollar of your income before the month starts and you don't have a plan for that money, as the money comes in throughout the month, you're going to get confused and not know where to put it, and it's going to be overwhelming and stressful. Okay, the next question that I get a lot that I actually was specifically requested from one of my budget coaching students to talk about in this video that I think would be helpful to a lot of people is balancing your budget. So this is such an important step because this ensures that you are actually tracking every dollar. There are a few steps to effective budgeting. First, you budget all your income and then you record what you actually spent throughout the month and you compare the two. So for that step of recording everything throughout the month, it is very important to balance that against your actual bank account and your credit card statement if you use credit cards responsibly, to make sure that you're not missing any entries. So this is not a real budget. I just put this together as an example for this video, but let's pretend we are doing our budget. So we have budgeted $4,000 of income. Our left to budget is zero because it's been allocated to all of our budget expenses this month. Now, when we say allocated, that doesn't mean we're spending everything. Some of it can be going to savings or debt payoff. So the way this spreadsheet can balance against your budget, and if you're a millennial or older, then this is the equivalent of like balancing your checkbook. And if you're Gen Z or younger, then you probably have never heard of that. But basically, like back in the day, there was no online banking. So people would write down in their checkbook every time they wrote a check, because there also weren't debit cards, and they would keep track manually of what their bank account balance was so they wouldn't accidentally spend too much and write a check for money they didn't have. And then when the bank statement came in at the end of the month, they would check it against their check register where they wrote everything manually to make sure it all matched. And that's what we're doing here. So the way my spreadsheet does this is through this section right here. So right here in this white box is where you put your bank account balance. So when the month starts, you want to make sure that the bank account balance in your actual bank account matches your budget balance. And your budget balance on the first of the month is a total of everything that's in your sinking funds. So it's the first of the month, we're all balanced, we're all good, great. So now we've got some transactions that are happening the first week of the month in our bank account, and we're going to enter those in. Okay, so we've entered some expenses into our spreadsheet. We're just looking at our online banking and entering each transaction and putting those into the spreadsheet. And then you look at your bank account and it says your balance is $9,200 and your budget balance is $9,200. So there's no variance here and we know that we are balanced. Now it gets a little trickier if you use credit cards for expenses, and we use credit cards for some of our expenses. I pay them off basically weekly, and we haven't paid $1 of credit card interest since we paid off our credit card debt back in 2021. So if you can't use credit cards responsibly, I would not recommend this, but if you are not accumulating credit card debt on a month-to-month basis, I think they're fine to use. We like to use them for the points and for the protections that credit cards offer versus using like your debit card or your checking account to pay bills. So now we go over to our credit card and we see that there are 4 transactions that we need to enter. So how do I do this? First of all, once I'm done entering my bank account entries, I like to put a little X here, and there's nothing over here in the sinking funds transactions right now in this example, but if there were, I'd put a little X on the last transaction so I know where I stopped for the checking account entries. Then I enter the credit card expenses. So I'm saying I got food twice. There's 2 charges for food on my credit card, and then I spent some money from my sinking funds. So for vacation, $200, and for my pet. Okay, the next thing I do is I go here and I highlight everything that I just entered that were credit card entries. So on my computer it's Command, but I have a Mac, so it might be different if you have a PC. But I highlight everything that I just entered that was on my credit card, and I look at the bottom right corner and I see the sum is $285. then what I do is I go ahead and I make a payment for $285 on my credit card, in that exact amount. I don't care what my credit card says I owe on the credit card. I don't care what like pending charges are on there, just charges that have cleared that I haven't paid off already. I make a payment just for those charges. You can also, if you want to, like make these a different color, and so you know their credit card charges, and so when you're looking back to see like where did I leave off, you can see easily, okay, what was the last credit card charge that I entered? So I go ahead and make a payment for $285 and I see that I'm off on my budget. It's not balanced by exactly $285 because that's how much I just entered. So what I do is I go here, I right click, and I make a little note and I say credit card paid on 5/16 or whatever the date is, $285. So that reminds me that when I go back into my bank account, I'm gonna see a charge for $285 for a credit card payment the next time I'm doing my budget. And I know that I don't need to enter that anywhere because it's already been entered, and I know that that will be the right amount to balance my budget. So when I go back into updating my budget next time and I just look at my bank account entries, I can skip the $285, enter everything else, and then it should balance. Once the payment does clear and I'm able to balance it, I go ahead and delete this note, or usually what I do is it's the following week and I'm doing this whole thing again, and so I'm making another payment to my credit card and I just update this note so when I go back in next time, I know where I left off. So that is how you can balance your budget pretty easily while still using credit cards. I don't wait for like once a month for the payment to auto pay. I find that too confusing to do while you're trying to track every dollar. I manually pay my credit card each time I update my budget. It's usually about once a week. Okay, the next tip for budgeting with a spreadsheet, and this works for any spreadsheet, is something that I just showed you a second ago, and that is using the notes feature. So I use this all the time. And I really like it because it allows me to have notes that I can refer back to, but it doesn't clutter up my spreadsheet by being able to see it all the time. So when I put the spreadsheet together, I considered putting an extra column right here for notes for each transaction, and I just felt like it looked messy, and you don't need to see your notes all the time. Most of the time you take the note and you never refer back to it, but it's just nice to have if you're looking for something specific. So rather than have something you can see all the time that clutters up your screen, you can just take a note, like let's say food here, you're going to like a birthday dinner for a friend, whatever. And so you put a note there, because then later on the month when you're looking back, and let's say you went over on groceries or food, whatever the category is, and you take a look at your notes and you're like, oh yeah, well this month was different because we did have this extra thing that I don't normally do. Or you can see, no, these were all just regular grocery purchases, like maybe I need to adjust my budget because I spent more on groceries this month and last month and the month before, and it's all just been like regular spending. So it kind of helps you keep track of those things, but in a way that doesn't clutter up your budget and make it hard to read. All right, my next tip for using a zero-based budget is you need to make sure the left to spend is zero at the end of the month. So right here, we've got a left to spend of $2,125. That's because I paid us all the income that we're gonna make for the month already, but we haven't paid all of our expenses yet. And I rely on this heavily throughout the month because I like to know how much I have left to spend, because just because you budgeted a certain amount doesn't mean that's actually gonna work out. If any of your categories are going over what you had planned for, then you're not gonna have as much for the other categories, and this left to spend helps me keep that in mind. So right now the left to spend is $1,225, and when I look at this budget, I can see, okay, debt is paid for the month, done. Over here, rent is paid for the month, utilities are paid for the month, I still have to pay subscriptions, I still have food and gas, and I have some miscellaneous that I've allotted for. I also need to fund my sinking funds, which let me just actually do that. Okay, so sinking funds are funded, now I have $1,900, and I know I had budgeted $1,250 for investing, plus I've got some other expenses that I need to pay. So it helps you keep track of where you are in the month and how much you have left to work with. Because if you look at your bank account and you have any sort of savings or sinking funds in there, like right now the bank account balance for this budget is $9,200, but you don't have $9,200 to work with, you only have $1,900, and that helps keep it clear how much money is actually left and how much is already earmarked, allocated for something else. Now my last budget tip is arguably one of the most important parts of budgeting, and that is reviewing it after the month is done. It's great to track everything, it keeps you like focused on how much you're spending and a little more mindful of things. But if you don't review it and reflect on what you did throughout the month, you're not going to learn from everything you recorded and your spending behaviors to make adjustments going forward. So my spreadsheet actually has some different reporting right there on each month. You can see how much you spent for each different category. So if you have a certain goal, a percentage goal for a category, like you want to put at least 10% of your income to debt payments or 20% of your income to investing or something like that, keep your expenses under 60% of your income. Whatever the goal is, you can easily see here, percentage-wise, how much went into each category. There's also a chart over here that shows you budgeted versus actual, so you can see, did you go over in one of the categories? And you can look month to month and see, am I consistently going over on expenses or consistently contributing more to investing than I'm budgeting for, and like give yourself a pat on the back for that. But you can just look through and have a quick visual to see, is your plan for your money what you're actually doing? There's also an annual summary tab, so as you accumulate months of data, you can take a look and see overall for the year, how am I doing? So that's available as well. So those are all my budgeting tips and kind of tricks to get through some of the tricky parts of budgeting. I've been budgeting consistently using a zero-based budget for almost 5 years now. So I like to think that I am an expert, but I am always still learning and adjusting when it comes to budgeting, because through each phase of life, the way you handle money and the things that come up are different, and so you always need to keep learning. If you like this video, as always, give it a big thumbs up, and if you want to see more from me, then hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and I'll see you guys soon in the next one. Bye!